Studios dumped one film into drive-ins, even though it starred John Ford's favorite actors. Another got buried because the director went over budget, and the studio wanted revenge. Critics called one Western a masterpiece, while the studio sent it straight to the bottom half of double features. Sam Peckinpah's first masterpiece got shelved for months because Columbia did not know how to market old cowboys facing death. And one film was so good, the studio panicked and sabotaged its own release. These are the 15 highest-rated 60s Westerns Hollywood buried. Number 15. Lonely Are the Brave. David Miller directed this Kirk Douglas vehicle about a cowboy who refuses to adapt to the modern world, and Universal had no idea what to do with it. The film cost $2 million, got rave reviews, and promptly died at the box office because the studio dumped it into theaters with zero marketing. Douglas himself called it his favorite film of his entire career, and spent decades furious that Universal killed it. Douglas plays Jack Burns, a drifter who rides his horse into 1962. New Mexico and finds the West has disappeared. Freeways cut through the desert, helicopters track him, trucks dominate the roads. Burns breaks his friend out of jail, not because of the crime, but because he cannot stand seeing a free man caged. The escape becomes a manhunt with Burns on horseback, fleeing modern technology. The script was written by Dalton Trumbo, finally working under his own name after years on the Hollywood blacklist. Trumbo adapted Edward Abbey's novel, Brave Cowboy, and kept the book's melancholy meditation on freedom and obsolescence. This is not a shoot-'em-up Western. It is an elegy for a way of life that cannot survive in the modern world. Walter Matthau plays the sheriff hunting Burns, and he does not want to catch him. He understands what Burns represents and knows that capturing him means destroying something irreplaceable. Their cat and mouse game across the mountains is tense, but also sad because both men know how it has to end. The final scene is devastating. Burns almost makes it across the highway to Mexico. Then a truck hauling toilets hits his horse and destroys everything. The symbolism is obvious, but it works. The Old West was killed by modernity, literally run over by commerce. Douglas sold the ending hard, and it breaks your heart. Universal released Lonely Are the Brave in June 1962 with almost no advertising. Critics loved it. Audiences never found it. The film made less than $1 million domestically and disappeared. Decades later, it was rediscovered and is now considered one of the best Westerns of the 60s. But in its time, Universal treated it like garbage and made sure nobody saw it. Moran number 14, Two Rode Together. John Ford directed this James Stewart and Richard Widmark Western, and Columbia buried it so thoroughly that most people do not even know it exists. Ford himself dismissed it as a paycheck job, but the film is far better than its reputation suggests. Columbia dumped it into theaters as the bottom half of double features and pulled it after 2 weeks. The studio had zero faith in a Ford Western without John Wayne, and their apathy killed the film. Stewart plays a cynical marshal hired to negotiate with Comanches for the return of white captives. Widmark is the cavalry officer who reluctantly partners with him. The premise sounds standard, but Ford subverts it at every turn. The captives do not want to be rescued. They have lived with the Comanches for years and consider themselves Comanche now. Bringing them back to white society destroys them. Ford does not romanticize either culture. The Comanches are pragmatic traders who know exactly what the captives are worth. The white settlers are racist hypocrites who demand their children reject them for being contaminated by Indian life. Stewart's character sees through it all and just wants his money. He is the most honest person in the film because he admits he does not care. The river conversation between Stewart and Widmark is one of Ford's best scenes. They sit on a log discussing the futility of what they are doing. No music, no cuts, just two actors talking for 5 minutes. Ford lets it breathe, and the scene reveals more character than most Westerns manage in 2 hours. The film also features one of the darkest scenes Ford ever shot. A white woman raised by Comanches is brought back to her original family. They are horrified by her. She is horrified by them. She runs away and throws herself in the river rather than live in white society. Ford shows the settlers' racism, destroying her without commentary or judgment. Columbia released Two Rode Together in July 1961 and immediately abandoned it. The studio was angry that Ford had not delivered another Searchers. Critics were mixed. Audiences ignored it. The film made minimal money, and Ford himself trashed it in interviews, claiming he only made it for the paycheck. But Ford scholars now recognize Two rode together as a bitter, cynical masterpiece about the lies both cultures told themselves. Number 13, Will Penny. Tom Grease wrote and directed this Charlton Heston Western about an aging cowboy facing obsolescence, and Paramount sabotaged its release because it was angry with Heston. The film got spectacular reviews. Critics called it the most realistic Western ever made. Paramount released it in March 1968 with almost no promotion and pulled it from theaters after 3 weeks. The studio buried it out of spite. Heston plays Will Penny, a line rider in his 40s who realizes he has no future. He has no money, no land, no family. He is too old to keep doing the only work he knows. When he meets a woman and her son living in a remote cabin, he has a chance at something different, but his past catches up in the form of a psychotic preacher and his sons who want revenge. What makes Will Penny special is its complete lack of glamour. Penny is not a hero. He is a working cowboy who smells bad, sleeps in his clothes, and eats terrible food. The cabin he guards is filthy. The cattle work is boring and dangerous. Grease shows the West as it actually was for most people, not as Hollywood usually portrayed it. The relationship between Penny and the woman, played by Joan Hackett, is tender but doomed. She wants him to stay and build a life. He knows he is too old and too broke to give her what she deserves. Their goodbye scene is heartbreaking because both of them know it is the right decision, and it still destroys them. Donald Pleasence plays the preacher as a completely unhinged zealot. He quotes scripture while ordering murders and genuinely believes God commands his violence. Pleasence makes him terrifying, not through scenery chewing, but through quiet conviction. He believes every word he says. Paramount was furious at Heston for taking the role in Planet of the Apes instead of another big-budget epic they wanted him for. So they killed Will Penny deliberately. Minimal advertising, limited release, pulled early. The film made less than $2 million. Heston said it was the best work he ever did, and he watched the studio bury it for petty reasons. Critics agreed. Decades later, Will Penny is recognized as a masterpiece, but in 1968, Paramount made sure almost nobody saw it. Number 12, Ride the High Country. Sam Peckinpah's first great Western got dumped by MGM as the bottom half of double features, even though critics immediately recognized it as something special. The film cost less than $1 million, and MGM treated it like a disposable product. They released it in May 1962 with zero marketing and pulled it after a minimal theatrical run. Only after it won awards in Europe did MGM realize they had buried a masterpiece. Joel McCrea and Randolph Scott play aging gunfighters hired to transport gold from a mining camp. Both are broke and irrelevant in a West that has passed them by. Scott's character plans to steal the gold because he has nothing left to lose. McCrea's character must decide whether to help his old friend commit the crime or to stop him and preserve his own honor. This is Peckinpah's elegy to the classic Western before he began deconstructing the genre through violence. The film is elegiac and sad, about men who have outlived their time and do not know how to function in a world that no longer needs them. Scott and McCrea are perfect because they were both aging stars of classic Westerns, playing characters who represent their own obsolescence. The wedding sequence in the mining camp is grotesque. A young woman is forced to marry one of 5 degenerate brothers who live in squalor and treat her like property. Peckinpah shows the ugly reality beneath Western mythology. These are not noble pioneers. They are violent idiots exploiting everyone around them. The final shootout is brief and unglamorous. 2 old men with shaky hands are trying to shoot each other before their bodies give out. Peckinpah filmed it in bright daylight with no dramatic music, just the reality of aging men facing death without dignity or glory. MGM released Ride the High Country as a B-movie they had no faith in. Critics in the United States praised it, but nobody listened. Then it played at film festivals in Europe and won awards. French critics called it a masterpiece. Only then did MGM realize what they had and tried to re-release it. Too late. The damage was done. Peckinpah never forgave MGM for burying his breakthrough film. Number 11. Ombre. Martin Ritt directed this Paul Newman Western based on an Elmore Leonard novel, and 20th Century Fox had no idea how to market a Western where the hero is a white man raised by Apaches who lets white people die rather than save them. The film got strong reviews, and Fox immediately panicked. They gave it a limited release in March 1967 and pulled it quickly because audiences were not ready for a Western this cynical about white civilization. Newman plays John Russell, who was raised by Apaches and lives on a reservation. He inherits a boarding house and has to travel by stagecoach to claim it. The other passengers are various flavors of white racism and hypocrisy. When they are robbed and stranded in the desert, they expect Russell to save them using his Apache survival skills. He refuses because they spent the entire trip treating him like dirt. The film forces viewers to side with a protagonist who watches white people suffer and does nothing. Russell has no obligation to help people who hate him. When he finally does act, it is not because he suddenly believes in their common humanity. He acts because one person, played by Diane Salento, treated him with basic decency. Richard Boone plays the villain, a former lawman turned robber who justifies his crimes through elaborate rationalization. He is intelligent and articulate, making him far more dangerous than a simple outlaw. His scenes with Newman crackle with tension because both men are smart enough to see through each other's poses. The ending is brutally unheroic. Russell gets shot saving someone who does not deserve it. He dies in the dirt while the people he saved walk away without gratitude. Writ does not give the audience catharsis or meaning. Russell dies for nothing, and the people he saved learn nothing. Fox released Ombre cautiously and pulled it fast when it became clear this was not a crowd-pleasing Western. The film made modest money, but Fox treated it like a problem rather than an asset. Critics recognized its intelligence and moral complexity. Audiences were not interested in a Western that made them complicit in racism. Ombre disappeared and took years to be recognized as one of the decade's smartest Westerns. Number 10. The Shooting. Monte Hellman directed this existential Western starring Warren Oates and Jack Nicholson, and no studio would touch it. Roger Corman finally agreed to finance it for $75,000 if Hellman shot two Westerns back to back. The shooting and ride in the whirlwind were made simultaneously in the Utah desert with skeleton crews. Then both films sat unreleased for years because American distributors thought they were too weird and uncommercial. The plot is deliberately opaque. A mysterious woman hires Warren Oates to guide her through the desert. She is hunting someone, but will not say who or why. Jack Nicholson plays a gunfighter who joins them. The journey becomes increasingly surreal and violent. Characters die without explanation. Motivations remain unclear. The ending is ambiguous and unsettling. Hellman was not interested in traditional Western storytelling. He wanted to strip the genre down to its existential core. Men wandering a hostile landscape with no clear purpose or destination, and violence erupts for reasons nobody understands. The desert is a blank canvas where meaning dissolves. The cinematography by Gregory Sandor is stark and beautiful. Empty horizons, characters dwarfed by landscape, harsh sunlight, bleaching everything white. The film looks like a European art film disguised as a Western. That is exactly what killed its commercial prospects. No American distributor would release The Shooting theatrically. It played a few film festivals and then vanished. Finally, in 1968, it received a French release, and critics embraced it. Cahiers du Cinéma called it a masterpiece. American critics who finally saw it agreed, but by then, the damage was done. The film did not get proper American distribution until the 1970s when it played repertory theaters and college campuses. Nicholson was a star by then, and his early work suddenly had value. But in the 60s, The Shooting was considered too strange, too slow, and too uncommercial for theatrical release. Hellman later said, studios wanted traditional Westerns with clear heroes and villains. The Shooting had neither. It was a philosophical meditation on violence and fate, dressed up as a genre film. American audiences in 1966 were not ready for that. European audiences were. The film became a cult classic everywhere, except the country where it was made. Number 9. Major Dundee. Sam Peckinpah's Civil War epic got butchered by Columbia Pictures in one of the most infamous studio interventions of the decade. Charlton Heston plays a disgraced Union officer leading a mixed force of soldiers, Confederate prisoners, and criminals into Mexico to hunt Apaches. The production was a nightmare. Peckinpah went over budget and over schedule. Columbia panicked and took the film away from him. the studio cut Major Dundee from over 3 hours down to 2 hours and 3 minutes. Entire subplots disappeared. Character motivations became incomprehensible. The film's structure collapsed. Columbia then dumped it into theaters in April 1965 with minimal promotion and blamed Peckinpah when it flopped. What remains even in the butchered version shows flashes of brilliance. The opening Apache raid is vicious and chaotic. The uneasy alliance between Heston's Union officer and Richard Harris's Confederate prisoner crackles with tension. The deeper the expedition goes into Mexico, the more the mission unravels into madness and violence. Peckinpah was exploring themes he would perfect in The Wild Bunch. Men who live by violence discover that violence consumes everything, including themselves. The obsession with honor and mission, leading to self-destruction. The West is a place where civilization's rules break down, and primal savagery takes over. Heston fought Columbia to restore Peckinpah's vision, but the studio refused. The damaged version was all audiences saw. Critics were confused. The film made minimal money. Peckinpah's reputation took a hit, and Columbia used the failure to justify never giving him final cut again. Decades later, a film preservationist attempted a restoration, using Peckinpah's notes and surviving footage. The extended cut, released in 2005, runs 236 minutes and makes narrative sense. Critics finally understood what Peckinpah was trying to achieve. But in 1965, Columbia made sure nobody would see it. The studio sabotage of Major Dundee became legendary in Hollywood as an example of how not to handle a troubled production. Instead of working with Peckinpah to fix problems, Columbia destroyed the film and buried it. Peckinpah never trusted studios again and spent the rest of his career fighting for control. Number 8. The Professionals. Richard Brooks wrote and directed this mercenary western starring Burt Lancaster, Lee Marvin, Robert Ryan, and Woody Strode, and Columbia almost buried it despite the star power. The film cost $6 million, and the studio grew nervous about a western in which the heroes work for money, not honor. They gave it a limited release in November 1966, fully expecting it to fail. Instead, audiences loved it and forced Columbia to expand distribution. 4 soldiers of fortune are hired by a Texas millionaire to rescue his wife from a Mexican revolutionary who kidnapped her. The team crosses into Mexico, fights through the desert, and completes the mission. Then they discover the wife was not kidnapped. She ran away from her husband to be with the revolutionary whom she actually loves. The professionals have to decide whether to complete the contract or do the right thing. Brooks filled the cast with actors who understood moral ambiguity. Lancaster plays the explosives expert, still haunted by his idealistic days fighting for revolution. Marvin is the leader who has seen too much to believe in causes anymore. Ryan plays the horse expert, clinging to a code of honor in a world that rewards betrayal. Strode is the tracker who says almost nothing but conveys volumes. The action sequences are spectacular. Brooks used real explosives, real horses, and shot in the Nevada desert, standing in for Mexico. The raid on the revolutionary camp is intense and violent. The escape through this desert while pursued is genuinely tense. But the action serves character, not spectacle. What makes The Professionals subversive is its politics. The Mexican revolutionary is not a villain. He is fighting for his people against American economic imperialism. The millionaire is the real villain, using money and violence to possess a woman who despises him. The professionals realize they are fighting for the wrong side and switch allegiances. Columbia was terrified that this political message would alienate audiences. They initially buried the film, then were shocked when it made $14 million domestically. Critics praised it. Audiences wanted more. Columbia reluctantly expanded distribution, and the film became one of the biggest Western hits of 1966. But the studio never trusted Brooks again, and their timidity almost killed a film audiences clearly wanted. Number 7. Invitation to a Gunfighter. Richard Wilson directed this Yul Brynner Western about a town that hires a gunfighter to kill a man, then cannot control what they unleashed. United Artists had no faith in a psychological Western with minimal action, and dumped it into theaters in October 1964. Critics recognized it as intelligent and morally complex. UA pulled it after 2 weeks, claiming audiences wanted traditional shoot-'em-ups, not talk. Brynner plays Jules Gaspard d'Estaing, a Creole gunfighter hired by a New Mexico town to kill a Confederate veteran who refuses to leave his farm. The townspeople are all cowards hiding behind hired violence. Brenner's character sees through them immediately and starts playing them against each other for his own amusement. The film is about the mechanics of violence and how communities use it while pretending their hands are clean. The townspeople do not want to kill the veteran themselves. They want a stranger to do it so they can maintain their self-image as civilized people. Brenner exposes their hypocrisy by forcing them to confront what they are really asking for. George Segal plays the Confederate veteran fighting to keep his land. He is not a hero. He is bitter, stubborn, and violent when cornered. But he is defending what is his against people trying to steal it through legal manipulation and hired murder. The film does not make him noble. It makes him human. The climactic confrontation is not a traditional gunfight. It is a psychological battle where Brenner forces the town to admit what they are. When violence finally erupts, it is brief and ugly. No heroic posing, just men shooting each other at close range and dying badly. United Artists wanted a standard Yul Brynner action western. Wilson delivered a meditation on community guilt and the outsourcing of violence. UA Marketing had no idea how to sell it. They released it quietly and abandoned it immediately. The film made minimal money and disappeared. Decades later, Invitation to a Gunfighter has been rediscovered by Western scholars, who recognize it as one of the most intelligent deconstructions of the genre. But in 1964, United Artists treated it as a problem and buried it before audiences could find it. Number 6. Cheyenne Autumn. John Ford's final Western cost $4 million and became his biggest commercial failure. Warner Brothers released it in October 1964, expecting another epic hit from the master director. Instead, audiences stayed away from a 3-hour elegy about the Cheyenne people's forced march from Oklahoma back to their homeland. The studio pulled it from theaters after poor initial returns and never gave it a proper second chance. Ford made Cheyenne Autumn as penance for his treatment of Native Americans in previous films. He wanted to tell their story from their perspective for once. The film follows the Northern Cheyenne exodus in 1878, when 300 people walked 1,500 miles trying to return home while the army hunted them. The film is slow, elegiac, and deliberately non-commercial. Ford does not give white audiences a hero to identify with. Richard Widmark and Carol Baker play sympathetic Indian agents, but they are observers, not protagonists. The Cheyenne are the protagonists, and Ford does not subtitle their dialogue. You watch their suffering without full comprehension, which is the point. The Dodge City sequence derails the film completely. Ford inserted a 40-minute comedy interlude starring James Stewart and Arthur Kennedy as Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. It has nothing to do with the main story and stops the film dead. Warner Brothers begged Ford to cut it. He refused. Critics savaged the sequence and audiences were baffled. Despite that massive structural flaw, the rest of Cheyenne Autumn is Ford's most beautiful and mournful work. The compositions are painterly. The landscapes dwarf the humans struggling across them. The violence, when it comes, is brief and tragic. Ford shows the Cheyenne as dignified people fighting for survival against a government that wants them erased. The ending is deliberately anticlimactic. The Cheyenne reach their homeland. The government allows them to stay. No triumph, no victory, just exhausted people finally allowed to stop running. Ford does not give audiences catharsis. He gives them the truth. Warner Brothers blamed Ford for the failure. The film made less than $2 million domestically. Critics were split. Audiences rejected a Western that made them sympathize with the Indians over the cavalry. The studio buried Cheyenne Autumn, and Ford never made another film. His final statement on the genre that made him famous died at the box office because nobody wanted to hear what he had to say. Number 5. Outrage. Martin Ritt directed this Western remake of Rashomon, starring Paul Newman. And MGM had no idea how to market a philosophical puzzle disguised as a genre film. The film adapts Kurosawa's masterpiece to the American Southwest, with Newman playing a Mexican bandit accused of murder and rape. 4 witnesses tell 4 completely different versions of what happened. MGM released it in October 1964, and pulled it within weeks when audiences rejected a Western with no clear answers. Newman plays the bandit with a thick accent and wild mannerisms that critics found excessive. He is trying to channel Toshiro Mifune's performance from the original, but it comes across as a caricature. Still, his commitment is absolute, and when his version of events plays out, he sells the braggadocio and violence completely. The structure is what killed the film at the box office. Each witness tells their story, and each story contradicts the others. Lawrence Harvey plays a Southern gentleman whose version makes him the hero. Claire Bloom plays his wife, whose version reveals everyone as cowards and liars. The murder victim, played by William Shatner, testifies through a spiritualist, and his version damns everyone. Writ and cinematographer James Wong Howe shot it beautifully. The desert landscape becomes abstract and mythic. The camera movements are elaborate and theatrical. The whole film feels like a stage play brought to the cinema, while still retaining theatrical artifice. The point is that truth is unknowable, and everyone constructs narratives that flatter themselves. MGM audiences in 1964 wanted simple morality tales with clear heroes. The outage gives them moral relativism and epistemological uncertainty. Critics appreciated the ambition, but even they admitted the film felt airless and overly intellectual. MGM dumped the outrage with minimal promotion. The film made less than $2 million. Newman later dismissed it as a misguided experiment, but film scholars recognize it as a fascinating failure, an attempt to bring European art film sensibilities to the Western genre that audiences and studios rejected outright. The film was out of circulation for decades and remains difficult to find even now. B4. Hour of the Gun. John Sturges directed this sequel to his own gunfight at the OK Corral, and United Artists buried it, despite having James Garner and Jason Robards in the leads. The film picks up immediately after the gunfight and follows Wyatt Earp's revenge campaign against the Cowboys, who murdered his brother. This is not heroic myth-making. This is Earp as an obsessed killer using his badge to justify murder. UA released it in November 1967 and pulled it fast when audiences rejected an Earp film with no heroes. Garner plays Earp as cold, methodical, and increasingly unhinged. He hunts down the Cowboys one by one and kills them without remorse or legal justification. Doc Holliday, played by Robards, watches his friend become the thing he is hunting. Their relationship disintegrates as Earp crosses lines Holliday will not follow. Sturges based the script on historical accounts of Earp's vendetta ride. These events actually happened. Earp did hunt down and kill the men he blamed for his brother's death. He operated outside the law and got away with it because his legend protected him. The film does not celebrate this. It shows Earp as a man consumed by rage who destroys himself and everyone around him. The film is deliberately anticlimactic. There is no final showdown. Earp just keeps killing until he runs out of targets. Then he leaves town with nothing resolved and nothing learned. Holliday is dying from tuberculosis. The Cowboys are dead, but Arizona is not safer or better. Violence just created more violence. United Artists wanted another crowd-pleasing Western-like gunfight at the OK Corral. Sturges gave them a dark meditation on how legends are built on lies and murder. The marketing department had no idea how to sell it. They released it quietly and abandoned it when it made minimal money. Critics recognized Hour of the Gun as Sturges subverting his own mythology. He took the heroes from his earlier film and showed what they really were. Audiences did not want that honesty. The film made less than $3 million and disappeared. Decades later, it is recognized as one of the most honest Earp films ever made. But in '67, United Artists made sure almost nobody saw it. Number 3. The Stalking Moon. Robert Mulligan directed this tense Western starring Gregory Peck and Eva Marie Saint, and National General Pictures had zero faith in a slow burn thriller about an Apache warrior hunting his ex-wife and son. The film came out in December 1968, got strong reviews, and immediately died because the studio gave it almost no promotion and pulled it after 2 weeks. Peck plays a retiring Army scout who agrees to help a white woman and her half-Apache son return to civilization. The woman was captured as a teenager and forced to marry an Apache warrior. She escaped with their son, and now the father is tracking them. The entire film is the slow build-up to the inevitable confrontation. What makes the Stalking Moon special is what Mulligan does not show. The Apache warrior is barely seen. He is a presence felt more than witnessed. Footprints appear, people die. The sense of being hunted builds relentlessly. Mulligan creates dread through absence, making the warrior more terrifying by keeping him off screen. Charles Lang's cinematography is stunning. Wide desert landscapes that feel exposed and vulnerable. The isolated ranch where Peck makes his stand feels like the loneliest place on Earth. When night comes, the darkness is absolute. The warrior could be anywhere. The final confrontation, when it comes, is brief and savage. No dramatic speeches or drawn-out gunfights. Just two men trying to kill each other as efficiently as possible. Mulligan shoots it with documentary bluntness. Violence erupts, someone dies, and it is over. National General released The Stalking Moon with almost no advertising. The studio was focused on bigger releases and treated this as a minor western. Critics praised the craftsmanship and tension. Audiences never found it. The film made minimal money and vanished. Decades later, The Stalking Moon has been rediscovered by thriller fans who recognize it as a masterclass in sustained tension. But in '68, National General killed it through neglect and indifference. Mulligan deserved better. Peck deserved better. The film deserved an audience that never got the chance to find it. Number 2, Bandolero. Andrew McLaglen directed this James Stewart and Dean Martin western about outlaws and the posse hunting them across the Mexican border. And Fox sabotaged its June 1968 release because they were angry at Stewart. The film got decent reviews, and Fox pulled it from theaters after a minimal run because Stewart had turned down other projects they wanted him for. Studio politics killed a solid western out of spite. Stewart plays a con man who breaks his brother Dean Martin out of jail minutes before a hanging. They flee into Mexico with a posse led by George Kennedy in pursuit. Raquel Welch plays Martin's love interest, forced to go along. The deeper into Mexico they go, the more everyone realizes they are heading toward death, not escape. The film subverts Western expectations by having the outlaws be genuinely bad people. Martin's gang raped and murdered. Stewart knows his brother is beyond redemption, but loves him anyway. When Mexican bandits attack, the outlaws and the posse have to work together to survive. Then they go back to hunting each other. The final shootout is pointless and tragic. Everyone dies or is broken. Stewart watches his brother get killed. Kennedy gets his man, but feels hollow about it. Welch survives but loses everyone. McLaglen does not make it heroic. Just men killing each other because that is what they do. Jerry Goldsmith's score is melancholy and mournful. The whole film feels like an elegy for the moral simplicity of the Western genre. There are no good guys, just people making bad choices and suffering consequences. Fox buried Bandolero deliberately. Limited release, minimal marketing, pulled early. The film made less than $5 million. Stewart was furious. He knew Fox killed it to punish him. Critics recognized it as a solid late-period Western. Audiences never got the chance to decide for themselves. The film disappeared for decades. Even home video releases were limited. Fox treated it like an embarrassment rather than a quality Western with major stars. Only recently has Bandolero been rediscovered and appreciated for what it is. A well-crafted Western killed by studio politics. Number 1. Tell Them Willie Boy Is Here. Abraham Polanski directed this Robert Redford Western based on true events, and Universal buried it so thoroughly that it barely saw release. The film tells the story of Willie Boy, a Paiute Indian who killed a man in self-defense in 1909, then fled across the desert with his girlfriend while a massive posse hunted them. Universal released it in December 1969 to qualify for Oscars, then immediately pulled it. The studio had zero interest in a Western about Native American persecution and police brutality. Robert Blake plays Willie Boy with dignity and barely suppressed rage. He kills his girlfriend's father when the man attacks him with a knife. Then he runs because he knows no white jury will believe an Indian claiming self-defense. Catherine Ross plays his girlfriend who chooses to go with him, knowing it means death. Redford plays the sheriff forced to lead the manhunt. He does not want to kill Willie Boy, but political pressure and racial hysteria force his hand. The posse grows into hundreds of men, and treating the hunt like sport. Redford's character sees the injustice but cannot stop the machine once it starts. Polanski was blacklisted during the McCarthy era, and this was his first directing job in 20 years. He uses the Willie Boy story as a direct allegory for McCarthyism and mob justice. An innocent man hunted by people who need a villain, regardless of facts. The system protects itself by destroying anyone who challenges it. The ending is devastating. Willie Boy is cornered and commits suicide rather than be captured. His girlfriend is already dead. The posse celebrates. Redford's character is disgusted but powerless. The system worked exactly as designed, crushing people and calling it justice. Universal wanted nothing to do with a film criticizing American law enforcement and Native American treatment. They dumped it briefly, then pulled it completely. The film made almost no money. Critics who saw it recognized Polanski's brilliance. Audiences never got the chance. Tell them, Willie Boy is Here is obscure today, despite being one of the most politically sophisticated westerns ever made. The 1960s produced some of the smartest, most challenging westerns ever made. Studios buried them for being too complex, too dark, or too honest about American history. Critics recognized their quality, but audiences never saw them. These 15 films deserve better than the studios that killed them through neglect, spite, and commercial cowardice.